Hello, I'm Simon and welcome to the SciRob YouTube channel. In this video we've got a bit of a cautionary tale for you which can probably be avoided or certainly mitigated by just a bit of routine maintenance. So this is what coolant should look like. You know, it should be a nice clean, clear, the colour is almost irrelevant as long as it's the correct spec for your particular car, and should have no smell to it, no sheen to it, just it's just coolant, that's it. What you definitely don't want, you don't want your coolant to look like this. So what we have here is well, as you can see, a pretty mucky, murky, oily, sludgy coolant, and so the first thought when you see coolant like that is that you could have a head gasket problem, because when a head gasket fails, what can happen is the oil and coolant channels in the engine are no longer separated, and so you get this intermingling. But the oil on this car the engine oil was absolutely fine, no problem at all. The automatic gearbox fluid, however, that wasn't in quite such good condition. So what we had then was this situation where, well, you can see just from where the dipstick is, the fact that you can even see liquid there. It's almost overflowing just there. And on the dipstick, there's a kind of irony really of how this must not be overfilled is completely covered by oily coolant and gearbox fluid. So you can actually see where the hot marker is, and that's where the level should be. And so yeah, we've got an overfilled gearbox. And can we tell it's overfilled when we empty it? Well, we most certainly can, because this is what ended up coming out of the gearbox. And so, I mean, the guy that brought this car to me was, I think he'd had the problem for a lot longer than he was letting on, because the mix was absolute, and it was lucky to even get to me really, because there was virtually no drive. In fact, the car actually lost drive after I'd got it. So you can see what drains out of the system just here, and if you compare that to the 3 litres that was drained out in my recent automatic gearbox fluid change video, it's a different gearbox, but they both drain. They're both Ace in Warner boxes which drain around about 3 litres normally. You can see the difference, and so I reckon that ended up being overfilled by about 2 or 3 litres, something like that. There was a good 5 or 6 litres in that particular drain pan. And also as a result, you can see remnants of the sludge on the drain bolt, and basically that sludge is inside the gearbox and inside all the various nooks and crannies and channels, and it's probably made up of clutch material and all sorts. So this is beyond repair then, you would think, wouldn't you? But I had a couple of theories on it, and the guy, money was tight for him. He certainly couldn't afford the time and cost of a whole new gearbox, and to be honest with you, I didn't have the facilities to fit a new gearbox. So I offered this suggestion, and he kind of liked the sound of it, so I thought we'd give it a go. So initially it was to, obviously you're going to have to change the radiator, and because what happens here is the chamber at the side of the radiator, it's all within the same unit, but the automatic fluid comes out of the box for a period of time and flows through this chamber at the end of the coolant radiator, and then it goes back in the box. And so there's a heat exchange within there, so the gearbox fluid doesn't overheat. And so it's an internal wall within that particular chamber that's obviously been breached, and that's how you've ended up with this mix of coolant and gearbox fluid. And as you can see on here, I'm just putting my vacuum tester on it, and as you can see, it can't hold any kind of vacuum. I had good seals on the entrance and exit, and it couldn't hold vacuum, so there was clearly a breach somewhere within it. So the first job was to fit a new radiator, a new coolant radiator. That was about £110 for the actual part, and so obviously you'd also have to flush the cooling system, which I ended up, it worked out quite well. I ended up flushing the cooling system just with water, and it did the job nicely. But we then had this issue with still no drive. So basically you could put the car into gear, the wheels would be off the ground, and you rev the engine, and you'd expect to see the wheels moving, and there was nothing happening at all. So it was then just a question of, this was where my theory came in, where I basically thought, well, I'll just back flush the gearbox with a ton of fluid. And so I managed to borrow one of those oil pumps. Unfortunately, I didn't get to film the majority of this stuff. This was all kind of on the fly. I was dubious whether to make a video about it, to be honest with you, because it doesn't contain all the steps. But basically the pipe that comes out of the gearbox and enters the cooler, I basically put a hose onto that from an electric oil pump, which you can pick up off Amazon, 30 quid, something like that. Put the feed for the pump into fresh fluid, and just basically kept sending fluid backwards into the box. I eventually started to get drive going within the gearbox, so I could then put it into drive, rev the engine, and it started to engage the gears again. Now, what also came in absolutely invaluable with this was using the diagnostic software, VIDA, which is the Volvo diagnostic software, because what that enables me to do is to communicate with the transmission control module, and I can basically then activate the solenoids individually. I can force activate them. So even if nothing's happening as far as the lever's concerned, I can just basically, select the solenoid that I want to activate and press start and stop and do that. And I think that as a combination of back flushing fluid through as well as activating the solenoids and just being patient, eventually managed to get drive back into the wheels and managed to make the car work again, basically for the cost of a new radiator, some coolant, and a 20-litre barrel of automatic transmission fluid, which you can pick up for maybe 80 quid on eBay. So that was that. And in terms of completely avoiding this, well, unless you're going to routinely change your radiator to make sure you never suffer the breach between the coolant and gearbox fluid in the first place, I can't see any other way of 100% avoiding this, but that's quite an expensive precaution to take for something that doesn't happen all the time on cars. So I don't think that this particular problem just happens overnight or within one journey and you get the breach and the crack opens up in the radiator and you get this mix straight away. I think this happens over a period of time, and so just with regular weekly checks under the bonnet to make sure that all of your fluids are looking as they should look, and your coolant should look whatever is the correct colour, nice and clean, and not have any oily sheen on it or anything like that. And the owner was a bit coy about how often he went under the bonnet, and I reckon with just weekly checks, just making sure everything's in order, you wouldn't avoid the problem, but you would catch it much earlier, and so it would then just be a radiator change and a coolant flush. But unless you want to fit a brand new radiator every 100,000 miles or something, it's just something to look out for, not just on these cars, but any car that shares a cooling system for the fluid which passes by coolant, and therefore there's a chance that the two can mix. On this particular car as well, you also have the issue with there's a gearbox cooler, sorry, not a gearbox cooler, engine oil cooler, fitted to the near the sump at the back of the engine, and you can have a breach there sometimes, and people end up with oil in their coolant bottle. Well, that's engine oil then, once again, because coolant and engine oil pass very closely through this heat exchange. If you're going to change an intercooler on these, which, you know, they are known to fail, then, you know, when you change the intercooler, change the radiator at the same time, because it just adds 100 quid to the job, but the labour is virtually the same. So I hope you found that useful, and thanks very much for watching.